Uh, I know this is going to be an awkward request, but I've been attending a lot of online lectures myself, and frankly, I've been dozing off in a lot of those. Like it's very difficult to pay attention, and I'm entirely sure you all will also be facing similar issues, right? Because that's just one person talking for an hour gets really boring in between, and I entirely understand that. So my thought behind this session was that we try and not keep this to be like a workshop where I'm speaking for an hour. Instead, what we'll have is we'll have a process of uh, finding the truth about a particular position, right? And in this debate, in this conversation, I'm not going to start with the assumption that animals have rights. In fact, I'm going to start with the contrary assumption that animals don't have rights. And then we try and justify that assumption. And we try and build an argument to that end. But for that, I really want you all to either, if you can, and if it's not awkward or uncomfortable, if you can, please turn on the videos so we can, speak. And also, since there's just 9 of us, I think it'll be a lot of it'll be a lot more easy for us to just engage and discuss and explore these ideas. And we just start by examining every single argument and breaking it down, seeing whether or not it works out. And then at the end of this discussion, hopefully we'll be able to reach like some consensus on whether or not animals have rights. So if you can turn on your videos, and if you can just like throughout this session, constantly discuss things with me, because this is honestly something that I think is best understood and best discussed when we're all just throwing our ideas at each other, as opposed to just one person speaking and everyone else dozing off, which is what happens in my online classes when I'm attending them at my law school. Yeah, I really hope none of my professors end up seeing this. Yeah, hopefully not. Okay. Sure, okay. Otherwise, if anyone's like uncomfortable with opening their video camera, I can understand. That's not an issue. You can nevertheless still, just unmute yourself and participate. So that is also fine. I really appreciate that. Okay. So I thought let's begin this with a thought experiment, right? Let's forget animal rights for a moment. Let's now start with a thought experiment. The year is 2500 AD, right? Some 500 years from now, humans have developed a spaceship that can transcend beyond our current galaxy and go to some other galaxy. And in that galaxy, we found a planet where there is intelligent life. Okay. Now, humans have gone to that planet, and we see that there are actually we actually have aliens there who are beings with some degree of intelligence. Like they communicate with one another in their own language. They have some basic social codes that they follow. They are also sentient. Now, the term sentient simply means that they have the ability to feel pain, right? Like if you hit them, they'll feel pain. For the purpose of our discussion, we know this about them. And yeah, we know for a fact that they are definitely scientifically, technologically inferior to us, because we are the ones who reached out to them. We are the ones who developed a spaceship. We are by far technologically superior to them. So now my question to you is, what do we do with this alien species? Okay, I think there are 3 options that we can have. First, we recognize the fact that we're superior to them, so we convert them into our and again, I use this term recognizing that it's a term with a lot of historical significance, but we use them as our slaves. Basically, we exploit them, we make them do all our work, we possibly kill them whenever we want to, and we do all kinds of terrible things to them, but that's just because we can do all of it. Second is we say that, their lives are none of our business. We want to respect their autonomy, we want to respect their liberty, and we leave them alone. Okay, so we just leave them alone. We come back to Earth and we lead our own life in a normal way. The last option, just give me 1 second. I'm really sorry, give me 30 seconds.
In the meanwhile, for those of you who joined a bit later, Parth has requested us to open our video cams if we can, because it's going to be a highly interactive session. It would be nice if we could open our videos.
Hi everyone. Sorry, some family matter had come up. Okay, so yeah, second option is that we leave them alone. We say, you know what, we don't want to bother you. We are going to come back to our own planet. The third option is we try and establish some sort of a relationship of mutual interdependence where we live alongside them. We try to benefit them. We also take benefits from them. Okay, so we kind of live together, and the way we live with our neighbors, we try and manage some cordial accommodation with them. So yeah, okay. Now the floor is open to you all. Which option do you prefer and why?
I think leaving them alone would be the best thing, because there
Okay.
is no inherent benefit that we can get from exploiting them. I think if we can get a lot of benefit from exploitation, I think then it would be a different answer.
You can get benefit. Okay, for starters, you can. So say for instance, I tell you that you can kill them and like get protein from eating them. Would you? And secondly, you can like use them as your labor. So you don't have to force humans to do all of those menial jobs. You force these aliens to do those menial jobs. Those are benefits to you. So yeah. But no,
Um,
I get the idea. It's a good point you made.
I think if I have to be like insanely rational, I think the first option is the best way to go, given that we don't have to really suffer the consequences, given that we don't really have to go to war. Like that's just being ultra rational. But if like we're thinking it from a human perspective, I think it would be like I would go for the third one, where we establish a relationship where there's a cordial trade or something that is happening that benefits us both.
Okay, okay. Some sort of a cordial relationship. Okay. Anybody else would like to give their inputs? Which relationship would you prefer?
I'd say the first one because like there's already so much human suffering on Earth. Assuming they can't feel pain at the same level as us, and we don't like relate to them on a human level, I'd say we like prefer the human race and its survival, existence, flourishing, etc.
Okay, okay. Uh, just I want to clarify. When you say they cannot feel pain, I mean they can feel pain. They feel pain, and we know that. I mean, no one person can say that my pain is more significant than theirs just on a like by looking at the other person. So they feel pain, but I get what you're saying. You're saying human survival is more important, and that's what we need to preserve, right? Okay.
If we, let's say, attack them, is there any chance that they will attack us back? For example, if we kill them, there is no chance. I think
Possibly.
then there is no harm to exploitation.
Okay.
I think it's okay to exploit them.
Okay. No harm to exploitation. Okay. Anybody else? Other people. Even if you don't want to, unmute yours. Like even if you don't want to put up your videos, you can always unmute yourself and say. Or worst case, you can even type it in the chat box. We'll definitely be able to engage that way also. Anyone would want to say anything? How do you think humans should go about building a relationship with these other entities? Okay. Yeah.
I think the third one, like mutual dependence, would be the best option to go through, because I don't actually believe that we should exploit them such a way that it can be termed as slavery. But I also believe that we can get benefits from them if we are benefiting them in a way. So third one will be the most rational way.
Okay. Okay. One of the participants and observer, that's an interesting name, has pointed out correctly that humans are terrible with management. So we should ideally ignore them. Okay. That's also a pretty valid point. Just join. What is the question here? So Apratim, this was like a initial thought experiment. It'll be a bit tedious to narrate the whole thought experiment, but you've joined at the right time because now we're coming back to the non-thought experiment bit. Oh wow! Oh damn! Observer person has actually typed it down. This is great stuff. This goes in my autobiography. The whole bit that you've typed in the chat. Great stuff. Okay. So yeah, okay. Now for a moment, we dropped the thought experiment. I really appreciated the ideas that I got there. now we come back to planet Earth. Okay, back to the 21st century, all of us leading the lives that we are currently leading. Okay, my first question to you is, do you think it is morally justified for us to kill animals for food? A simple yes or no. Morally justified to kill animals for food?
Nope.
No. Okay, Sirish, no. Just, I know how, there's this thing where you can set up a poll, but I don't know. Oh yeah, wow. Sirish KO, launch poll. How do I launch a poll, guys?
It's not possible right now. We have to go to the website and make a poll.
Okay, drop it. Okay, cool. So then I just take like oral, I take oral ballots, or you type it in the chat box. So how many think it's morally justified to kill animals for food?
It's not.
Okay, Apratim said no, Sirish said no. Are you all saying this because you think I am like an animal rights supporter and suddenly I'll be like, oh my God, you all terrible human beings. I'm not taking this workshop anymore. Because honestly, I told you, right, we're starting this with the presumption that there is no correct position here, right? This is a position that we have to discover together. And for us to reach the truth, you all have to tell me what you honestly think, because I am equally willing to be persuaded by an argument to the contrary, right? I'm just telling you right now that if by the end of this session, I am convinced that there are sufficient moral reasons to kill animals, that then becomes my new moral position. I then start advocating for that position, because that's how I think humans should work, right? You get arguments that are persuasive enough and logical enough, and you then change your stance based on those arguments. So I'm willing to engage in a change of my stance, but for that I need to also hear you all take stances that you genuinely think are true. Morally
I think
justified, no.
it is for
Yeah,
like
okay, great.
because we mass breed so many of them for that reason, and they don't live the best of lives. So if we're actually reducing the like total quantum of pain by killing them, both for them and we're increasing happiness for us, I feel that's a good trade-off.
Okay, that's a very interesting argument. So the argument is that since so many we mass spread so many animals and we are also forcing them to lead such terrible lives, it's just perhaps morally justified to kill them because it reduces their pain. Okay, interesting argument. Mass breed, terrible lives. Okay. Okay, any other justifications for why we can kill animals? Okay. Now let's just drop the morally justified thing. I am telling you that it is morally justified. What are the possible reasons that we can give to think that it is morally justified?
I think it's just one case in terms of pragmatics. Like if, let's say, meat in certain places is like simply cheaper than having other alternative food. In that case, like if people are, let's say, living in, I don't know, place where there's a lot of ice, where not a lot of things grow. So like in that case, it is just pragmatic. Like people cannot just choose the alternative.
Okay. That's a very valid point, that in certain situations where, say for instance, the circumstances are so hostile, you just have to survive on animal food. Okay, fair.
I think in places like India where 92% people can't afford a good diet, there's I think 85 or 62% people suffering from protein deficiency. For these people to have a good life, to have this amount of protein, the cheapest sources of complete protein, of good quality protein, is usually cheap forms of meat like pork and chicken. And also, I think the second reason why people might eat is because oftentimes in cultures that have gone through, periods of poverty and all that, food is a very big source of happiness and satisfaction. And for these people, eating meat is a sort of celebration. I think we should not bar them from celebrating as well if they want to.
That's two very valid points. Firstly, the prospect of this being a good cheap source of protein, and secondly, the cultural value of meat for a lot of communities. Okay, fair.
I have another idea.
Yeah.
Can we just say that like they don't live in a system of law, they don't have any covenants that govern them. Essentially, they live in a state of nature. In this state of nature, whoever's more powerful should get to exploit others. We shouldn't regulate it. Hence, humans more powerful. Yeah.
Great. This is survival of the fittest argument, if I may call it that. Yeah. This is survival of the fittest. Very interesting argument. Honestly, you guys are giving like great valid points. We'll discuss each one of them, but keep throwing more ideas, right? Like, what is it?
Counter arguments as well.
Yeah.
Are we discussing counter arguments as well?
So right now we're establishing the case for why killing is justified, and then we start to like slowly look at the counter arguments for that case.
Makes sense.
Okay, I see Milandai is also there. So Milandai, please, hot takes. Okay. Other people also give hot takes. It's not just Milandai who has hot takes to give in life. Okay. One argument we've obviously covered is the survival of the fittest. The food chain argument, anybody would want to, anybody believes that if we don't kill animals, we kind of mess around with the food chain, possibly? No? Okay. Got a bounce. Okay, no eyes, Apratim, no eyes. See you around.
Is there an argument that can be made in terms of like, I think this is like the most politically incorrect thing to do, like in terms of taste, just like liking meat in many ways, and just have like just the net happiness that increases out of eating meat is something that is valuable.
Human happiness, taste and preference. Fair. Okay. Great. State of nature, survival of the fittest. Okay. I think we've gotten 5 valid arguments. If there's any person who'd want to add anything to this, then you please do, and then we'll move to the next set of questions surrounding what is justified and what is not. Any other person who'd say why killing or eating meat is justified? Any other ideas possibly? Okay, cool. I got a bunch of ideas. We'll explore them further. Now, let's take a different moral question. Is it morally justified to kill human beings? For the purposes of food, not for the purposes of like they've committed a crime, but for the purposes of food.
No, because on a utilitarian basis, if we go around killing people, I think killing itself is something that's very hurtful to humans and we should not do it. But also, I think life is something that's valuable, especially a life that can experience so many emotions and so many experiences like a human one. I think destroying that isn't a good thing.
Okay. So life is valuable and also a life that has the capacity to experience so much. Okay, fair. Any other reasons why it's wrong to kill human beings?
Can I point out one reason?
Yeah.
What I think is that it would actually cause an increase in emotional stress.
Okay.
Because we never know if that the one we are eating right now is someone we actually know or someone we care or someone we are very intimate with. And,
but Rajit,
the counter argument can be maybe say that the people that we use for meat are we do not expose their identity, but that will even more increase the emotional stress that we might get while eating. Because we actually, like I said, we will never even know if it was actually someone related to us.
Rajit, what if that person is your biggest enemy? Like I'm telling you that, Rajit, here have dinner. This is the guy you hate the most. And you are having that person for dinner now. Then, I mean, does the emotional stress get converted into emotional joy? It's a boss you hate, and now you're having that boss for dinner. Is that something that is ethically justified?
There are some situations that we wish not to happen even to our worst enemies as well. And I would say that that category falls upon this as well.
Okay.
I feel there's one justification. So there's this case called the Spelunchian Explorers.
Yeah.
So imagine if you're stuck in a cave with no alternative out. Like the only way for any of you to survive is to eat. Or even in normal life, if like you're gonna die of starvation.
Yeah.
I suppose then it simply is a form of like sustenance or self-defense. You can probably do it. Although like you will go to jail.
Okay. Great point by Harsh. Also, great point by Observer. Observer has pointed out that society has acknowledged that humans have rights, and therefore we do not perhaps have the right to kill other people. Okay, cool. So now I think we've got a bunch of ideas. Any other person wanting to point out why killing human beings is wrong? If not, we can move to the next.
Okay, I think I have an idea. Like we believe I would not go and directly kill a human being to eat something, because one, I belong to the same species or same like living being, so I kind of emotionally or socially connect to them. But I also believe that we as a society are killing human beings, right? Be it soldiers or be it doctors in this pandemic or things and such. We do kill them indirectly for the collective good, but we are not going and directly killing them for food or something like that, because we socially are this human right thing where essentially connect to them. So that's it.
Two very good points by Bipin. Okay, great. So now we've gotten so many ideas, we now start to place them together. Now the first idea that I want to discuss, Sirish,
just a last idea. I think I heard it somewhere. This is called the theory of speciesism, meaning that every advancement that has been made in the human species is due to the collective efforts of human as a species. Other species are there because they are there and they want to kill us, they want to destroy us, they want to harm us. But the group of humans is the only group that wants to collectively enhance the living standards of humans. So I owe something to this group that has helped me.
Owe something to one another. Okay. Great point, Sirish. Okay. So now we start to take all of these arguments and discuss them one by one. Okay. Now, the first thing that I want to discuss, and this is an argument that you would very often hear in debates about when killing animals is justified, is the argument of extreme circumstances. Okay. There's this really famous argument that you'd always hear whenever you say that animals have rights is, what if you're stuck on a deserted island and the only option you have there is an animal? Will you starve yourself or will you choose to kill the animal and eat them? Now, I think the reason this argument, Prajit has given another suggestion. It has been justified that eating humans is wrong because human meat are low in protein and cannibalism can lead to very fatal brain contaminating diseases. Okay, so that is like a utilitarian argument that it causes us damage, therefore we should not eat. But Prajit, on the off chance that human meat was actually great for protein, will you then be fine with killing other humans? Okay, we can come to this argument as well, right? We can come to the discussion of this argument. Okay, so yeah, firstly, the argument from extreme circumstances, the fact that you are stuck on a deserted island and therefore you need to do this to survive. Now, the reason I think this argument per se is not a valid justification for killing animals is for the reason, and as I think Harsh pointed out, is that when you're stuck in an extreme circumstance, then there are anyway no traditional norms of morality that can govern your actions. For instance, the Spelunkian explorer's dilemma, where you're stuck in a cave and no rescue has come for the past 20 days. And if you do not kill a fellow member and survive, you're going to die yourself. Now, in those situations, I think most people will be willing to kill another human being as well, right? Because at the end of the day, you can say this is an act of self-defense. So this is an act of survival. Now, the reason we do not ideally use these examples as basic moral foundations in a debate is because morality is judged in ordinary moral circumstances, right? You do not judge morality in the most extreme circumstance, because when we're looking at what is a moral thing to do, we're seeing whether this thing is something that we can expect a majority of society to do, right? If I'm saying it is unethical to kill animals, I'm saying it is unethical for a majority of people to do so because we're living in circumstances where we're not stuck on a deserted island, right? Where we do not have just one possibility of killing an animal and surviving, right? We're living in a civilization where there are multiple other possibilities of surviving without killing animals. And that is the primary reason why I think the argument from extreme circumstances, as I call it, is not a valid defense for why killing either humans or animals is justified, because extreme circumstances cannot be the basis for any sound moral principle, right? I hope that is something you all agree with, or if there are any disagreements, please point out and we can discuss that as well. Okay, cool. You all please feel free to rebut also, because these are, again, as I said, ideas that even I am still exploring. So in case there's any disagreement, I'd be willing to acknowledge that, and if that idea convinces me to the contrary, then I will be willing to switch my position as well. So yeah, okay, that is why I think extreme circumstances do not make for sound moral principles. And as Prajit has pointed out, that Life of Pi also has a similar situation. Yeah, I mean, yeah, all I'm saying is you're stuck on an island, you're stuck on a boat. These are not normal moral circumstances, right? This is also a very funny vegan meme that somebody sent me, is that I want to go vegan, but for some reason I keep getting stuck on a deserted island, right? Okay. So yeah. Now, the second basis on which we can justify humans exercising some sort of superiority or some sort of dominance over another species is by virtue of the fact that we belong to the species and they do not. Okay. Now, this is an argument that I think Sirish points out as speciesism, which is that humans collectively work as a species, and therefore there is some moral basis for us to safeguard our interests to the exclusion of all other species. Okay. Now, my first question to you all here is, what is species really? What do we mean? What is species? Is it a moral category or is it a biological category?
Biological.
Okay. Yeah. Harsh is also correct. Yeah, both of you are correct. Species is the biological category. Okay. Now, philosopher Peter Singer, he coined this term speciesism, and he said that to say that I should prefer members of my species over another species simply because they belong to the same species as me is no different than a white person saying I should prefer members of my race to members of another race, or a man or a patriarchal man saying I prefer people of my gender to people of a different gender. These are, at the end of the day, simply biological categories. And until and unless we point out what is unique about that biological category that deserves superiority, till that time, we cannot really say that simply being a member of that biological category is a criteria that justifies either better rights or lower rights, right? It's again, if I were to tell you that there is a world where an alien species invades us and tells us that we are going to kill you, and we say, why are you going to kill us? And they say, actually, your species is different from ours. Does that come across as sound moral reasoning? Perhaps not, right? Because all we're saying is that this is a genetic category and there is no moral value that you can attribute to the genetic category in and of itself. You can attribute certain value to being human, and that value we can possibly discuss, but the genetic part of it is not something that is morally significant, at least in my understanding. Okay, but now let's try and come to the next aspect of it. What is it about humans as a species that makes us morally superior? There are a lot of reasons that we can give here. What is it about humans as a species that makes us morally superior? Any idea?
Because when the time comes between choosing things that are good for us, beneficial for us, and choosing and things that are morally correct, I think humans have the capability to do what's right, and an organism or an entity that can choose to do the right thing, that can choose to do the right thing even in the face of adversity, is somehow a better moral actor, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. What Sirish has just pointed out is the framework for a majority of the past like centuries of legal development. Now, if you look at how the law has developed, the law has only treated as human beings, majorly, as entities who can possess rights. And the most basic justification given for that is that if an entity is to be given certain rights, then that entity has certain duties. Okay, you cannot have rights without having certain duties. And since only humans can perform moral duties, only humans are deserving subjects of moral rights. Now, this argument is based on this concept by this old philosopher called Hofford. Okay, old by old I mean a century old. Okay, Hoffer gave this concept of jural postulates, which said that the correlative of a right is a duty. If you have a right, then you also need to have a duty, and only humans can perform duties. Now, does this argument seem valid on the face of it, right? It seems like a decent justification that animals cannot perform duties, therefore they do not deserve rights. Perhaps we can say that. Now, I point out two counter examples here. Okay, infants, right, which are young children, cannot perform any duties whatsoever. You cannot expect an infant to act in a morally responsible way. You give an infant a gun, right, and the infant randomly presses the trigger. Can you say that the infant was acting in a morally wrong way? Or can you attribute moral incorrectness to that infant? Perhaps, right? You will not say that that infant is a morally terrible being. In fact, something I can point out from the example of the Indian Penal Code, which is the law that governs crimes in India, it says that nothing that is done by a child under the age of 7 is an offense. So a child under the age of 7 can kill a person, and that is not an offense, simply because we recognize that the child does not have moral responsibilities. Simply, there are individuals who are, say, severely, like individuals suffering from severe cognitive disabilities, or individuals who are like senile. A person is like 90 years old. They've lost like a lot of their like mental faculties. These are all individuals who fall outside the category of the right and duty binary. These are individuals who cannot perform duties the way a lot of other members of societies traditionally can. But is it anyone's... Yeah, I'll just complete the sentence and then you please ask. Yeah. But is it anyone's case that persons with severe mental disabilities, persons who are infants, or in like very old individuals, would anyone say that these are individuals who do not deserve rights? I don't think that at least most legal frameworks operate on that argument, right? Most legal frameworks recognize rights for all these individuals without the right and duty category. Yes, Harsh.
Yeah, aren't all of these extreme circumstances? And
okay.
Should we not ditch our moral theory based on these?
Okay, this is really great. So the tradition, this is really great because the name that opponents of animal rights have given to these cases, right, like these examples, are arguments from the margins. Okay, they say that these are marginal cases, right? But the reason I don't think that these are marginal cases, and the reason I don't think this is an argument from the extreme circumstances, is because the claim here is that there is value X that entitles you to have rights. Okay, value X here is morality or rationality, or the capacity to perform duties. I point out individuals who do not satisfy value X and nonetheless have rights. Now, what is the justification to give these individuals rights? And the category that you then fall back upon is species. And if I have already argued to you that species is not a morally significant category, then species cannot be a morally significant basis to give individuals who do not possess value X the same rights as individuals who fall outside that category. Yes, Sirish.
On the case of infants and children, I think they have the ability or the capability to perform duties in a later time. I think if we give them right now, then they can probably do better duties and be a better citizen or a better person. On the case of, just a second, I don't have here clip, I'm really sorry. In the case of old people and let's say people with disabilities, I think they still deserve rights because they have gone through a process of giving moral duties. They have gone through the process of doing good things. I think they have done their fair share of job, and it's now their time to, I guess, redeem their rights.
Yeah, okay. That is great. Sirish, these are, again, I love this because these are all arguments that have historically been so aggressively debated and were also undergoing the similar process of discovering those arguments. So the first argument that is given perfectly valid by Sirish is that children in the future have the capacity to perform duties. Okay. My question to you is, what if they did not? I put to you a hypothetical situation, okay, where there are 1 million children suffering from a terminal illness that will unfortunately take their lives away before the age of 7. Assuming, again, I'm relying on the penal code example here, but assuming for the purposes of our conversation, that beyond the age of 7, you get some moral capacity to perform duties. I'm telling you, there are a million children who will not reach the age of 7, and therefore will never be able to perform duties in the social sense. Would you be fine with saying that these individuals should be killed? They can be killed for no reason other than the fact that you want them to be killed, or the fact that you derive some pleasure from killing them.
I think we should not kill them, because killing them is not so good. I think people would oppose that because it would make people sad and people miserable. But I think we can restrict their ability to do many things. I think we can still restrict, let's say we restrict the ability of very old people to drive as well. I think in the same way, we can also restrict these children's ability to harm. I think we can keep them in schools or prisons or anything.
That is great. Will you be fine with imprisoning terminally ill children below the age of 7? I've made it sound like a unfair question. I know. Sorry for that. But will you be fine with imprisoning terminally ill children under the age of 7?
It's recorded, right? If the
okay, I got it.
If the prison is really comfortable,
paparazzi is watching.
Yeah, if the prison is like very comfortable, if they have, I don't know, Doraemon and stuff inside the prison, and if they are happy, I'm fine with it. I mean, I imprisoned my younger brother inside my home, inside the room.
But then you're not saying you'd want to imprison them, right? Then you're just saying you'd want them to get perfectly good facilities that they would otherwise get in a home. Okay, now coming back to what Sirisha said, it's a brilliant point. I just, for the sake of future generations who are watching this and in case Sirish ever becomes a celebrity, we'll definitely dig this video up. I just want to point out that this is a moral discussion, so you can obviously give extreme views as well, because we're all trying to reach a correct moral position. But yeah, just Sirish, you should really hope like in the future people don't land up on this video. I'm kidding. I'd really want people to give different views as well. So yeah, okay. Now this is great because the question is, when we're advocating for the rights of animals, what rights are we advocating for? Nobody is saying that animals deserve the full spectrum of rights that humans have, not for the reason that animals are morally inferior, but because so many of the rights that humans have are absolutely unnecessary to animals. For instance, the right to vote. We do not expect animals to require the right to vote and participate in the political process, saying, no, make America great again. Bunch of chimps supporting make America great again. Don't really expect that to happen, although it does. I'm kidding. Okay, so all I'm saying is that rights such as the right to drive, the right to vote, the right to stand for elections, so many of the right to religion, so many of these rights are never advocated for animals because we recognize that animals do not need these rights. I'll give you another example. Within our legal systems, companies are recognized as legal personalities and they have certain rights. Okay, so they have, say, for instance, the right to privacy. You cannot arbitrarily go ahead and say tamper with the company's documents unless you have reason to believe that they're doing something suspicious. But would any of us say that a company should also have the right to religion or the right against torture? Perhaps not, because we recognize that these rights are incompatible with the entity that is a company. Similarly, Sirish's point about certain rights, such as the right to drive, etc., not being valid for either persons with significant mental disabilities or infants is perfectly valid, but that is not the right that we're anyway advocating for them. We're advocating for much simpler rights, much more foundational rights at the point at currently, which are rights against torture, right to life, right to liberty, right to bodily integrity. These are the rights that I think a majority of animal advocates argue that animals should have. And these are the rights that I think a lot of us would agree that infants should also have. They should not be tortured. They should have the right to life. They should not have the right. They should have the right to be free, right to liberty, not be imprisoned, right? So again, I know we've gone on a slight detour here, but I'll come back to the main point, which is what is it about being human that gives us certain privileges over animals? One possible example is the fact that we are moral agents. However, there are other moral agents. However, there are other humans who are not moral agents who are nevertheless given these rights. So why that dichotomy is something that I'm asking, is something that you can also possibly ask and try and answer. Again, for say persons with significant mental disabilities, what if that person never performed any duties? Would we be fine with saying that that person does not deserve any rights?
I think like we shouldn't take a all or nothing approach. Like I think even infants are given on a sliding scale of rights, right? Like they don't have the right to earn a livelihood or something. Like old people or like people who are going senile, they don't have the right to like write a living will or not be resuscitated or something. So I think we give them rights proportional to how many duties they can perform. And like animals can't perform as many duties.
The question is, do we give them rights proportionate to how many duties they can perform? Or do we give them rights proportionate to what they need? Perhaps the reason we do not give infants the right to perform trade is because we currently recognize that they do not need the right to perform trade. Right? Like the freedom of trade is something that is not particularly relevant to the child of the age of 4, right? Similarly, the right to vote. I mean, you can say that they need to have that right, but it will be a real stretch to say that at the age of 4, you need to be informing the government that governs you. Okay, I now come back to the old question of what are possible reasons why these individuals deserve rights. There is a second justification for why individuals who are infants, persons with severe mental disabilities deserve rights, and that is because we care for them. Is the fact that they're a part of the human community, and all of us therefore ascribe value to their life. Okay, and therefore we think that the legal system ought to protect them. Does this seem like a valid argument? It's an argument based on community and the value that communities ascribe to the life of fellow members of that community. What say? Guys, please just, okay, could I repeat this part? So we were discussing why is it that, say, infants have rights, but say an elephant, which by the way, a lot of science now tells us is that elephants are cognitively, again, I don't want to use the word superior, inferior, but they have the same cognitive skills, at least of the infant of the age of 5. Okay. And elephants, by the way, are also able to recognize themselves in mirrors, which is what is known as the mirror recognition stage, which is like how scientists determine whether the entity has self-awareness. So there are so many animals, elephants, chimps, who can participate in so many of these cognitive activities that other human beings do. So my question to you then is, why do these animals not have rights, but infants have rights? We recognize that rationality is possibly not a basis. Another basis that a lot of people give is the fact that we as a community care for children. We care about our old people. We care about persons with severe cognitive disabilities. We care about children, and therefore they deserve to have rights. Is this a morally sound argument? What say?
I feel there are a few issues with this. One is just that if we were to follow that basis, right, like we'd allow white people to live in like white segregated neighborhoods because they care more about their community. Yeah. Secondly, I think even humans ascribe value to their dogs or their pets. Similarly, we ascribe less value to other communities.
Yeah.
So like foreign communities.
Perfect. Right. So I think we all recognize the fact that what one human thinks of another human should not be the basis to determine that other human's rights. Okay, like, again, to give an example, what if that child was an orphan and nobody cared for that child? None of us would say it is morally justified to kill that child because no one cares for them, right? So simply because we as humans ascribe value to another person's life is not a moral basis for that person to have rights or not have rights. So then, what is the basis for having rights? Now, when I asked the question, why is killing human beings wrong? Somebody pointed out that humans have the capacity to feel so much, right? Which means they probably have, greater emotional skills, greater cognitive skills. But again, so I want to point out two things to the contrary. First, that a majority of animals also have significant capacities to engage in emotional and mental conduct. So a lot of animals live in herds. A lot of animals have familial bonds. This is something that is true, that when an infant monkey dies, very often the mother monkey is so aggrieved by that process that she dies by that grief itself. Okay, when bulls are separated from their herds, they experience terrible amounts of anxiety and distress. Okay, so many of the things that we ascribe as being valuable to humans, things such as family, things such as friends, things such as staying in your own community, and things such as staying in your own natural environment, are all experiences that animals also get to experience. Now, you may say that humans have the capacity for certain enhanced experiences. What are those enhanced experiences? We can read books, animals cannot. We can fly in a plane, animals cannot. We can watch movies, animals perhaps cannot, or understand them. But these are arbitrary markers of what is a morally significant experience. A fish might argue, if you were to allow it to argue, that the joy of swimming across the Indian Ocean is unparalleled. And simply because a human cannot swim the same distance as a fish can, a human has a morally insignificant life. Or an eagle that says that just because humans cannot fly off their own wings, they do not live morally significant lives. We would all recognize these as arbitrary distinctions between which experience is morally significant and which is not. I guess again, any disagreements here, please point them out.
Can we talk about how rights are not just something that exists, but something that society agrees to give? Like, we have newer and newer rights coming in because the society agrees that we need to give those certain rights, and because the society at large cannot empathize with other species, does not care about other species as much as they do about humans, because they are from the same group. I think, can we make an argument about how the society should not give it to them because it does not owe them?
Makes a brilliant point, but that is something I'm just going to come to in like a minute or two. Okay, so all I wanted to point out was that the fact that human life is more valuable than animal life is not an assessment that we can make as such. It requires a lot of preference given to arbitrary criteria that we think are morally significant. And I just think that that preference and that prioritization is at some level really arbitrary for us to say that this experience matters more than that experience. Now we come to the most foundational question: what is the basis of rights? I've pointed out to you why being a member of a species is not ideally a basis for having rights. Pointed out to you why intellect is not the basis on which you have rights. Pointed out to you why the value of life cannot be adjudged in concrete terms. So then what is the basis of having rights? Why is it that we say that humans have rights and animals don't? Okay, but humans can deliberately change the environment around them. Deliberately change the environment. Let's just disregard the effects that animal has in their food chain. Okay, Abhi, when you say deliberately change the environment, you're saying that we have greater capacities to influence our environment around us, right? Okay, there's one. Yeah, perfect. Now there's one argument that is, I think, slightly linked to what Abhi was saying, and I will build on it, is the argument of survival of the fittest. We are a superior species, and therefore we have certain rights that animals ought not have, and we are justified in doing what we want to do to them. Now, we all know who Jeff Bezos is, right? He's currently the second richest person on this planet. My question to you is that he is by far economically superior and fitter than all of us here, right? Like he can buy a military to himself. He can buy private assassins who can go about and kill any person. So if tomorrow Jeff Bezos decides to kill a poor person, okay, or takes a tractor and runs it over a poor person's house, and we ask, what is the moral justification for you to do that? And he says that I am fitter than that person. I am superior. I am stronger. Does that come across as a sound moral basis for Jeff Bezos to have killed another person? Is it sound morality for me to say that because I'm stronger than another person, I have the right to kill that person? Yeah, wow. Salman Khan, yeah, that actually it was his driver, guys. just factually clarifying stuff. Okay.
I think that moralities are also constructed in a way that benefits more people. So if we apply survival of the fittest within the human community, then the human community as a whole does not benefit from it. But no, I don't know what I'm
Okay,
talking. I'm sorry.
no, Sirish, it's all right. I have two things to point out. Now, the first thing, and this is something I find so fascinating.
But wait, yes, like
yes,
I want to ask you one question. Like you told about survival of the fittest, right? But that is when you come. I mean, like when you compete for a resource, like when Jeff Bezos and that poor man, it is not necessarily that they are competing for the same resource, right? So like, so I don't think that the survival of the fittest can be applied there.
Okay, what Abhi has just said right now is brilliant, and it also ties back to what I was going to say. Now, Abhi says that Jeff Bezos and that person are not competing for the same resources. My question to you is that are you and a chicken competing for the same resources? Are you and the chicken competing for survival? And now let me give you some facts. The fact is that we kill over 72 billion animals a year for food. Okay, these are not animals that come into existence out of nowhere. These are animals that we force breed on a mass scale. The kind of industrial animal agriculture that we're seeing right now is absolutely unprecedented. We're forcing chickens to produce eggs at hundreds of their normal bodily capacity. We're force inseminating cows to produce calves that are a lot more than any cow would ever produce normally in its life. So we are first bringing into existence so many animals, okay, for no other purpose than for our greed. Now, these animals are not directly threatening us in any way, right? If we were to leave chicken alone, or if we were to leave cows alone, okay, it's not as if they were tomorrow going to overthrow your government and establish a coalition government of cows, pigs, and chicken. These are animals that are animal farm for the win, okay? These are animals that are leading their own lives. We are the ones who are going ahead and excessively interfering with their lives and distorting the entire food chain in the process. So I don't really get how this is a question of human survival. In fact, I think survival is our survival, if at all, is threatened by the contrary. The fact that we are currently spending so much of our land resources in mass producing animals is something that is actually possibly leading our planet to extinction. How do I say that? The animal agriculture is one of the biggest sources of producing global greenhouse gases. Why is that? For two reasons. One, cows and other poultry naturally release methane into the environment, which traps the functioning of oxygen and prevents like, again, this is scientific, so I have to look up the exact terms for it. But methane is one of the contributors to the greenhouse effect. But secondly, it takes 11 times the amount of food protein to produce 1 kilogram of animal meat than it would if we were to produce 1 kilogram of vegetable protein. All I'm saying is if you need to get 1 kilogram of protein from a pig, you will have to feed that pig for a year and then kill that pig. However, if you were to simply use the same amount of food and directly channel it to human beings, you end up saving a lot more food, a lot more land, a lot more water. So if anything at all, the kind of industrial animal agriculture that we are seeing right now is not about competing with animals for survival. It's in fact about putting our own survival in jeopardy. So again, this is why I don't think that this is a question of survival of the fittest. And at any rate, my point is, I don't think survival of the fittest is a morally sound theory. Because at no other point in time would any legal system allow the fittest, the most powerful, the richest persons to simply go ahead and kill and bulldoze another person and justify it based on their superiority. I don't think any moral system or legal system would allow for that. However, that's the argument that is traditionally given with respect to human conduct with animals. Okay, was any of this unclear? I know I spoke for like a lot of time. Sorry. Okay, coming back to now, and this is where we'll also conclude, because I realize we've like the next 10 minutes we'll conclude because I've spoken for a lot time, and then we can also discuss things. What are the bases for giving rights to individuals in a society? Firstly, who gives us rights?
It depends on your legal theory, right? Like either like we have natural rights because we're human, or states and societies give it to us.
Yeah. So there are, okay, as Harshis beautifully pointed out, there are 2 to 3 broadly competing theories of where and how rights originate. One is the natural rights theory, which says that rights originate simply by virtue of us being members of the nature and us being members of the human species. The other theory is that governments and states and constitutions give us rights. Okay, my question to you firstly is, do you think that the second theory is correct, that our rights are actually given to us by the government? What do you think?
It's more like it's the government that protects our rights.
Yeah, that's fair. Because see, come to think of it, if our rights are granted to us by the government, then the government can whimsically also take them away from us. If rights are a generous gift of a benevolent government, then the government can also change its mind and simply withdraw those rights from us, right? Because those rights are not inherent to us. Those rights are gifts that a good government has chosen to give to us. And now that the good government does not think that we deserve those rights, the government chooses to take them back. But that is why I don't think a lot of the modern day jurisprudence recognizes the concept that rights are grants given by the state or by constitutions. Okay, so if rights are not given by the state or by constitutions, then how do rights come about? Do they come about?
I think rights just exist. I mean, they just exist like a concept, like mathematics or something. Like there are rights.
Yeah, there are rights.
We need them to protect our dignity, to survive, to ensure some basic like social goods like equality and.
But who decides that who will then have those rights? If they exist out of nowhere, right, then it will be very arbitrary for tomorrow white people to say that rights exist out of nowhere, but they also only exist for white people. Or men to say that they exist only for men. We do have to recognize that rights need to exist for a group that has a moral justification to claim those rights, right? So what is that? How do those rights come about, and which group can then claim a moral justification?
Is it because of culture? Is it because of culture? Like it's something that everyone agrees, and that is why we call it a right or something like that. Is it?
Okay, so that is similar to what you can say is the social contract theory, which is that humans have collectively signed a contract to enter into peaceful relations with one another, and therefore have given up on certain privileges and in return received certain rights. Abhi, is that something similar? Is that what you wish to argue? Like something similar to that?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Okay. So the
something like that.
Okay. Can I also mention one?
Yes, Prajit.
Can we say that rights are actually a set of like moral values, morally accepted values that the mass of the people, the most number of people agree upon? Like, for example, like we can see in our history as well, in the medieval times, the kings used to propose like certain rights on their people, and upon the peasants, there'll be like a different set of rights, and there will be formation of sort of a hierarchy of rights as well, and this will lead to a revolution of the ones who do not receive those rights that the so-called higher status people receive, and after revolting, they sort of make a new set of moral rights which they think is good for them, and which they think that they believe that they should get by seeing that the ones that that I mentioned, the so-called high status, have been receiving, and they try to distribute it equally, and this cycle keeps on repeating, and has resulted in the type of the social human rights that we now consider.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. So as Prajit points out, I think historically there have been very exclusion. The concept of rights has been very exclusionary rights. So you had the monarchy, and then you had the clergy. Beyond that, you had the nobility, and at the end, you had the peasants and the common working people. And that, to all of us, would obviously appear as an unfair basis for rights. Okay, so I think we can broadly agree that the rights, who should get rights, is not something that the powerful within society should exclusively get to determine, because then what we have are rights that protect not all of us, but protect their self-interest, which is why when the crown frames the rights, then you have the king who gets the most amount of rights and the workers who have the least amount of rights. Okay. Now, similarly, all of us would also agree that societies where a majority community gets to decide the rights for everyone else. Again, we have societies where there is so much ethnic discrimination, so much religious discrimination. A lot of it sanctioned by the law is not a fair moral society, because we're again letting one community protect its self-interest to the exclusion of another community. Which is why, for the past 50 to 60 years, our conception of rights has evolved to recognize what we call as universal rights. Universal rights and inalienable rights, which means that rights belong to every person, don't just belong to members of a certain class, caste, gender, religion, etc. And second, that these are rights that are inviolable or fundamental, which means that these rights cannot be taken simply because the majority or simply because the government wants to deprive you of those rights. These are two very important conceptions that we recognize with respect to rights. Now, I think that the social contract theory is not a valid basis to trace these rights. Why is that? I would want to point out to you that all the founders of the social contract theory, which are people like John Locke, Thomas Hobbes, recognize that the social contract theory does not give or take away rights. The social contract theory, there are certain rights that you get simply by being born in nature, which is what the state of nature that Hobbes referred to. And those rights are freedom and liberty. Okay. Now, in exchange of surrendering some of your freedom and liberty, you get certain rights of citizenship, certain political rights. Okay. So I get the right to live in a civilized society because I've given up my right to kill or my liberty to kill another person. So the social contract theory, a lot of philosophers now argue, is something that is not a governing concept for who gets rights and who does not get rights. It's basically a concept that determines the relationship between the state and its citizens. It is a political concept. It is not a moral concept. So my foundational question is, what is the moral basis of rights? And now I proceed to give the answer that I think is valid. It is that I think sentience, which means the capacity to feel pain and to experience emotions, is a sound moral basis for rights. And now I will proceed to justify that briefly. Now, the reason I say that a pen should not have rights is because the pen cannot feel pain, which means that if I were to tomorrow break this pen, I have not committed any morally wrong act because the pen does not feel pain. I can do something, it might be morally wrong, but that is only if the pen is owned by another human being, in which case I've committed an offense against property, not committed an offense against I've committed an offense against that other person's property. I've not committed an offense against the property itself. But when we look at animals, animals do have the capacity to feel pain. They do have the capacity to feel emotion. They have the capacity to understand what is happening to them. And the same is the case with a majority of the human species. Now, why do we say that sentience is a possible justification for having rights? Is that only if an individual has the capacity to experience and suffer, does the individual have an interest in not suffering, right? An entity that does not have the capacity to suffer perhaps does not have an interest in not suffering, which is why when you hit a pen or when you hit a stone, you haven't committed a moral wrongdoing. But when you hit an animal, you inflict something upon that animal that animal has an interest in not undergoing. And since the law is designed to protect the most basic interests of entities, sentience is a sound moral basis to protect the rights of individuals, and it is something on base to which we can protect the rights of animals. Again, to make it simple, a dog has an interest in not being hit. The law is meant to protect the most basic interests of individuals. A dog has an interest in securing its own life. A chicken has an interest in securing its own life, just as you and I do. And for those reasons, the law needs to protect the most core interests of these individuals, and therefore the law can use sanctions. Okay, Rajit's question is, in the future, if AI has the capacity to feel both physical and emotional pain, would you say that we should have rights? I think philosophically, yes. Any entity that has the ability to feel pain and has the consciousness of its own pain should ideally be protected from that pain. That is what a sound moral system looks like to me. Okay, now I have this, now an increasing amount of jurisprudence recognizes that the basis of rights is actually to protect the most vulnerable individuals against the most powerful members of society. Look at the kinds of rights that we have. And why did these rights come about? The freedom of expression, the freedom, the right to life, the right to vote. Why are these rights that most democratic societies seek to protect? Because we recognize that in the absence of these rights, an individual will be left to their most vulnerable sense. Because an individual can be arbitrarily jailed, an individual can be arbitrarily denied their freedom of expression, an individual can be arbitrarily killed. And the protection of these rights, why is it that we don't have a fundamental right to go abroad? I mean, we do have a right to movement, but nobody would say that my right to travel to the US is a fundamental right. Why do we not have a fundamental right to stay in a 5-star hotel? Okay. Why do constitutions not protect these rights? Because we recognize that the main aim is to protect the most foundational interests of an individual, without which the individual is left absolutely vulnerable. And I think that by basing our laws on sanctions, we protect the most foundational interests of animals who are equally capable of suffering so many of the pain and trauma and again, grief that humans otherwise have the capacity to suffer. So yeah, this is why I think societies can form perfectly sound moral and legal concepts based on sanctions. This is what a lot of philosophers have argued over time. Okay, so a question that Noor has asked, is there a consensus about animals having sanctions? Very good question. So in 2012, there was this document that was signed by some of the greatest cognitive neuroscientists, ethologists, and other scientists in the world, including Professor Stephen Hawking. It's called the Cambridge Declaration of Consciousness. And it confirms that a majority of animals around us actually are sentient and conscious, which means they both have the ability to feel pain and they are aware of what happens to them. So again, there are certain categories of animals which might not be sentient, but a lot of the animals and a majority of the animals that we use for scientific experiments, for food, for sacrifice, for sports, a majority of them, if not literally all of them, are sentient. So yeah, if they are all sentient, if they suffer pain, and if they have an interest in not suffering pain, then the law ought to protect that interest, just how the law protects the most foundational interests of all other members of society. Okay, Prajit's question, would humans have been able to form such set of rights if they didn't have the ability to feel pain? I don't know. I mean, see, the ability to feel pain, again, this is an interesting term and I will qualify it. Okay, and after this I'll add also, because I've been speaking for, I think, like a lot of times, so yeah. The ability to feel pain is a sufficient but not necessary criteria to have rights. Why do I say that? Because I think, and this is what a lot of philosophers have also argued, that if you have the ability to feel pain, then you deserve protection. That is a given. But there are also certain other individuals who do not have the ability to feel physical pain. Say, for instance, a person who is brain dead. Okay, there might be certain reasons why like their central nervous system does not function perfectly, and therefore they do not feel pain. I would not argue that you can just arbitrarily go ahead and kill that person. Okay, but that is something that we that is why we take other factors into account. We can take other factors into account. However, the ability to feel pain is a sufficient criteria for you to have rights. It's not the only criteria. Okay, there can be other individuals who fall outside this criteria but deserve rights, but it is nonetheless a sufficient criteria to have rights, is what I think the argument is.
Can this argument be extended to plants?
So yeah, okay, there are two. Plants is a very interesting example, guys. I'll also just go down because my battery is about to die. So I just put my laptop on charging as well. So the thing with plants is that is why you actually have a lot of scientific debate about whether plants are sentient or not. Why is that? Because there's a lot of scientific consensus. Okay, not a lot of scientific consensus, but like a considerable amount of scientific agreement that plants do not have a central nervous system. And a lot of people recognize that in order to feel pain, you need to have a central nervous system, which means that plants obviously can respond to stimuli, but that does not indicate the fact that they're feeling pain. Okay, so if I were to give you an example, human beings, there are certain instances where our body simply responds to stimuli. Okay, so for instance, when our body releases certain hormones that in response to sunlight, okay, that make our skin tan, that is us responding to stimuli, but that does not indicate the ability to feel pain. Okay, similarly, plants respond to stimuli, but it is not necessary that they actually have the ability to feel pain. And the second argument, which is what is like used to justify why killing animals is still ethically wrong, is that in killing animals, you're killing almost 10 times the plants. For the reason that I'd already mentioned, that you need to first feed all those plants to animals for over a year, and only then can that animal become like an animal that you can slaughter for food. So you end up, in case assuming plants have the ability to feel pain, animal agriculture actually furthers the pain of plants because you end up killing that many more plants.